Welcome students. This will be my last lesson on Chaucer, that is, you can come to me with any questions that you might have. So I will be finishing the reading of the text, which is very much necessary because reading of the text will enable you to answer most of the questions. So that is why I have taken the effort to finish the text with you at the very least. I have been giving you certain commentaries in between as well. So I will just do a quick revision of the last class. In the last class we read the portion where Alison was talking about her fourth husband, the fourth husband who was a reveler. That is, he had a mistress on his own. But Alison also says that by God on earth I was his purgatory. That means, so purgatory according to the Christian belief is the place where sinners are sent to repent their deeds, and repentance of course allows you to enter paradise, to enter the gates of heaven, that is. So we can assume in conclusion that Alison did carry softer emotions for this fourth husband, because she wanted him to reach heaven, because she was his paradise. And the husband also realized his mistake with the line that we read, that when the shoe bitterly his foot had wrung, that is, when the husband realized his mistakes, that is. So we can and we also see that he did receive a very grand burial, as he belonged to a higher social order. So then after that we will continue, and here with the fifth husband we begin. So now Alison is talking about the fifth husband. She says, let God never send his soul to hell. However, he was most cruel to me, and even now I feel his cruelty on each one of my ribs, which I shall remember till my dying day. She also says that, but he was in bed so vigorous and gay. Besides, he could always cajole and persuade me whenever he desired my pretty thing. Though he often beat me on every bone, yet he could soon win my love. So this is something we are talking about, abusive love, the kind of passion that is included in the cycle of abuse, abusive love. And Alison, she was attracted towards this kind of dominating love that the fifth husband showed to her, even though it was physically abusive to her. She says that, truly speaking, I loved him best because he was so sparing in love making, and that is, he indulged in sex very often, that is, occasionally. So he was so sparing in love making, she says. Now this is a bit ambiguous statement, because later on we learn that this fifth husband, that is Janikin, he was a scholar interested only in enhancing in knowledge in theology and of theology and religion, and he was hardly interested in sex, contrary to the expectations of Alison, who was very much charmed by his youth. And then she says that we women, if I don't tell a lie, have in such matters a curious fancy. We become crazy for a thing which is hard to get. Deny us a thing and we become crazy to get it. Give us a thing easily and we run away and don't desire it. When we find a man reluctant, that is unwilling to make love, we sell all our charms to attract him. More people, that is more buyers in the market, raise the prices of things and commodities. If a thing is available cheap, it is considered to be less of a value. Every intelligent woman is aware of this special nature of women folk. So she is basically advocating about the coquettishness of a woman. That is, you must not sell yourself to every person. That is, you must bargain. The woman must bargain for herself. So here we can see a kind of a mercantile phrases that Alison uses. A mercantile interest, a mercantile instinct is shown, a mercantile instinct of Alison that we come across over here. since Jankin was sparing in sexual matters, he enchanted her all the more. She was attracted to him all the more. She makes a comparison to various things in market. And according to market economy, if there are too many things in the market, the value of things, they come down. But if the things are rare, the market value goes up. So this was exactly the case of Jankin. The more sparing her was, the greater was Alison's urge to get him into bed. So the more, she thought about his sexual prowess, the more she was attracted to him. Then she says, as for my fifth husband, God bless his soul, whom I took for love and not for his wealth, had been for some time a scholar at Oxford, student of theology, like I was saying. He had left the school and had gone home to live with my friend living in our own town. God save her soul, her name was Alison. And she knew all my heart, that is, all her feelings, and also my private matters, that are secrets, better than a parish priest, so as I may prosper. To her I revealed all my secrets. If my husband had pissed on the wall, for had my husband pissed against a wall, as you can see on the line over here, on the screen that is, so if my husband had pissed on the wall or had done a thing that should have cost him his life. So Alison actually confesses all her sins not to a priest, which was the usual custom, but to her friend, and thus she almost ignores the religious practice and chooses, according to her, chooses a better alternative to open out her mind. Now, basing her opinion on this line, their opinion on this line, some critics, they have taken the view that Alison had aided and abetted Jankin in killing her fourth husband. And however, Jankin does not seem to be connected with Alison's fourth husband at all, her husband's untimely death. So some scholars are of the view that Alison abetted or aided Jankin or conspired with him to murder her fourth husband. However, the text does not support this view. Alison says that he died when I returned from Jerusalem. If you remember, in the last class we were reading this line, that he died when I returned from Jerusalem, though she does not actually explain the reason, circumstances of his death that led to the death. What disease did he have? What led to his death? She never tells us about them. So even if we assume that Jankin was helped and abetted by Alison to kill the fourth husband, we do not have any textual proof. So there is hardly any reference to Jankin being involved, except perhaps Alison's visit to Jerusalem, which actually proves her alibi, that she was not present while he was dying or during the incident of the fourth husband's death. And then she says that I told all my secrets to her and to another worthy woman, as also to my niece whom I loved well. I had revealed all his, that is my husband's, secrets in full, and I did this very often. God knows it all. But this made my husband extremely red with violence. Out of shame, he blamed himself for having told me all his private matters. Then she says, and so befell that once in a Lent, so it happens, that it so happened that during the period of Lent, so what is a Lent? Lent is a period of 40 days before Easter, like a Lent period bola hoy, and it is a period of confession, of repentance, fasting, prayers. Though a Christian, Alison makes the best use of her husband's absence for her amorous activities, for her lecherous activities, visiting all places seeking a proper and suitable mate. Thus, her religiosity is questionable. In fact, sexual delight is her only religion. Now, she refers to the Bible as a genteel text, and Alison's Prologue and Tale, the wife of Bath's Prologue and Tale, is actually a critique against gentilese, one of the themes that I had discussed, and I have also shared some materials with you regarding the same. So then she says, it so happened that during the period of Lent, I often went to visit my friend forever. I loved to be gay and cheerful, to walk about during March, April, and May, visiting various friends' homes to listen to all kinds of stories. So, as you can understand, Jan King, a professor of a student of theology, he would obviously be invested in these rituals during the Lent period more so than ever. And this is the time when Alison would go out to visit her friends, participate in her amorous activities. Then she says, during those days, Jankin the clerk, now her fifth husband that is, and my friend Alice went about into the countryside. My fourth husband was then away to London. That was the time I had a good time to amuse myself, to see and to be seen by all sorts of lusty, young and pleasant men. I had no idea of how my future was to take any course and where would I encounter such an occasion. So Alison does not hope for the grace of God, but she hopes to be fortunate to find a lover, though her fourth husband is still alive. So during this period of Lent, she does not pray, she does not repent, she does not ask for the blessing of God. She just wants to see and to be seen. She just hopes for a good sexual partner, and that is it. So she means she could hardly imagine how and where her good fortune was fated to take place. That is, where would she find a lusty, young and pretty man? She uses the word grace not to mean the grace of God, but the good luck to meet a lover. So we can say that sexual delight is her only religion. She subverts or she does not follow any of the Christian beliefs that her husbands or other people usually follow. Then she says, therefore I attended all vigils, religious processions, also listened to the sermons. So she went to all of these places in search of a lover, nothing else. I also visited various holy places to watch the plays about saints' lives as also marriages. For such visits I had put on my gay scarlet dress, which had not been touched by moths or insects or worms. You know why? Because those clothes were used extremely well. So she had been very careful of using those dresses. She only uses those dresses on very important occasions, meaning searching for lusty young men for sexual delight, that is, and nothing else. So we can already see how irreligious or how non-religious she was. She did not follow the conventional religious mode towards grace or glory. She did everything in the reverse. Then she says, now I shall tell you what happened to me, I mean in the fields. So what happens? What happened in the fields? Surely we had pleasant moment. Just a moment, yes. Surely, she says, we had pleasant moments of flirtations and intimate conversation. I spoke to him, Janikin, that is, about my household goods, including foodstuffs. I asked him if I were a widow, would he be willing to marry me? For marriage as also for other thing. So, she's giving us an incidental example that she's asking Jankin, she asked Jankin if I were a widow, if she would marry him. Now she also clarifies that she did not need a husband for any sort of convenience, because she was already in a very convenient social position or monetary position, financial position, that is. But she needed a married husband for other things as well, which we know what they are by now. I do not consider a mouse worth a thing if it has just one hole to escape. And if that hole falls or crumbles, the mouse is done for. That is, get killed. What Alison means is that she had made sufficient provision for her life to sustain herself in all adverse circumstances. So we can say with quite a bit of confidence that Alison was a very shrewd woman. She had made sufficient provisions. Her allusion to the mouse makes this point clear. So a mouse should not have only one mode of escape. So a mouse is ruined if its hole has no other way out to escape, if the one gets choked or crumbled due to one reason or the other. Alison has made good stock of both money and material to sustain herself during all kinds of circumstances, even following the death of a husband. And though we do not, Chaucer never mentions the Black Death, something that was raging through England at that point of time. Even though the prologue does not mention the Black Death, we might assume safely that Alison also had made provisions for the similar contingencies as well. So she is a very intelligent woman, gifted with an excellent foresight. She has made good provisions, wealth and property to sustain herself in case of any emergency. She is not like a mouse with only one escape hole, and therefore she quotes the proverb, if a mouse has just one hole to escape, it is done for. Then she says, I accused the clerk, though falsely, that he had enchanted me, that is Jankin. My mother had taught me such tricks. And besides, I told him that I always dreamt of him at night. He would have killed me as I slept on my back, and that all my bed was stained with red blood. Yet I hoped it would do me good, because the sight of blood indicates the good omen of gold. All this story was false, and I had dreamt nothing. However, I followed my mother's teaching in this affair and in other matters too. So here we might digress a bit and talk about dream interpretation for just a little bit. We do not need to indulge in the details. So blood betokens gold. It can have two interpretations, multiple interpretations. One of it being, just some time back I said that some critics would say that Jankin, the Jankin and the wife of Bath, Alison, they conspired in order to kill the fourth husband. So over here we might interpret it that if Jankin were to marry Alison, so Alison is telling this story to Jankin in order to allure him, in order to seduce him. She's telling him that I have had this dream where I saw that you would kill me on my bed, and my bed would be strewn with blood, red blood, but it is ominous, it is a good sign, because blood betokens gold. As I was taught by whom? Taught by my mother. My mother was the person who was the first person to intimate me, to force me into marriage at the age of 12. So we can interpret this as, that if Jankin were to marry her, he would be eligible to share all of the properties, the financial properties, the social position that Alison herself holds in the society. The second interpretation, it can so therefore the first interpretation leads us to partially believe in the fact that maybe Jankin did, the both of them did conspire to kill. Jankin was maybe forced or abetted or aided or manipulated by Alison in order to kill her fourth husband, and that when he would marry her, he could only marry her after the death of the previous husband. Like she's not polygamous over here. She can have only one husband. So in order to get rid of him, Alison allured or seduced Jankin that, see, if you marry me, you will be eligible to share all of these things that I possess. But in order to marry me, you have to kill my fourth husband. And therefore the blood blood strewn across the bed sheet, and therefore blood giving gold, betokening having blood being a symbol of gold. It can also be interpreted as the fact that that in a mercantile economy, if affection can be sold for materials, then materials can also be sold for affection. So blood, which is a symbol of bonding, which is a symbol of health, of relationship, of love as well, uh, if that can be sold for gold, if that can be sold for sexual pleasures or anything materialistic, anything temporary, then the other way around can also happen. That if you have gold, if you possess property and money and this and that, you might be able to find love as well. So remember, this is a mercantile economy. The fact that she constantly uses mercantile phrases and economic allusions, we can say that in an economy like this, where people believe in exchanges of matters, we can say that feelings and affections can be exchanged for materials as well. So then she says that, but how, sirs? Let me see. What shall I say? By God, I have to pick up my tale once again. So she is drunk, remember, she has forgotten, she has lost a train of thought, and she begins again. She says, when my fourth husband was carried on bier to be buried, I wept all right, and put on a very sad face as wives must do, for it was a custom. So it means that she was not at all sad, really, and she shed a few tears pretending to be sad. Thus she is a hypocrite. She says, I covered my face with my veil just to hide her true feelings from being noticed. There was nothing to worry about because I had already been provided with a mate. So Alison was not really sad about the death of her fourth husband because she had already come across her fifth husband, that is Jankin. So we know that she was already in acquaintance with Jankin even before the fourth husband died. So we can, add on to that kind of interpretation where scholars and critics say that Jankin and Alison, they conspired in order to kill the fourth husband. And why not the other husbands? Because you see, the fourth husband was buried in a lofty manner. He was buried in the altar right inside of the church. So that indicates a very high social position, a very high ranking of social order that the fourth husband belonged to. And that is why the murder, was somewhat necessary. The fourth husband, who was a reveler, the fourth husband was also not a very bad person, as Alison herself carried a soft corner for him, like I said. But it was necessary for him to be removed so that Alison could marry the person whom she was sexually attracted to, and the person may be entitled to share in her possessions if and after he has helped her in killing or removing the fourth husband from the scene. So we can assume this. We can provide, আমরা যদি লজিক্যালি টেক্সচুয়াল এভিডেন্স এইগুলোকে আর কি কানেক্ট করতে পারি, if you can construct your answers, your points of views like that, then it will be accepted. So she says that I wept only a little, and that I can swear the next morning my husband's, that is fourth husband's, dead body was carried to the church for burial. The bier was carried and followed by neighbors, all in a sorrowful mood, and Jankin the clerk was also among them. God help me, when I saw him walking after the bier along with others, I thought he had clean and beautifully shaped pair of legs. So look at what she is observing while her husband is being carried on his deathbed. Beautifully shaped pair of legs and feet. I was so charmed, and I surrendered my heart to him at once. At that time he was only 20 years old, while I was 40. Yet I say truly, I had always a youthful appearance. That is, I did not look that old. I was, she confesses, of a lascivious nature. That is, she was sexually alive. She was sexually on fire all the time, making her a very lascivious person, and she confesses this. And the sign gap-toothed suited or expressed me well. I had the birthmark of Saint Venus, and I was beautiful and rich, young and well provided for. My earlier husbands had told me that I had the best female sexual organs. So yes. So here we will see that she alludes, invokes Venus. Venus was never considered to be a saint, but Alison considers her a saint because Venus had given her all beauty and all female charms. And gap-toothed women were generally considered to be lascivious, something that we had discussed in the very beginning of our classes. They're cunning, they're false, and even gluttonous, lobhi, hangla. What sort of mark of Venus she has is not explained, except that her ascendant is Taurus, which explains her amorous nature. She's, as I had mentioned, Chaucer was heavily indebted to astrology in the creation of characters, and even in the Middle Ages, something that I had mentioned in the recorded classes, characters were created according to the lot of astrological assumptions. So we do not we can understand Alison's references of her riches, for she has inherited everything from her dead husbands, from her 4 husbands. We do not know why Alison referred to her female organs, and why had the earlier husbands admired her genitals. We do not know that. It may be for 2 factors. She had borne no child, perhaps, and after birthing children, women, the sexual organs or the physical organs of the woman usually changes. It goes through a lot of alterations, and I can crudely conclude that they may not remain quote unquote beautiful just after giving birth, or after giving birth to several children, if that is the case. So we can say that maybe she did not have any child, did not born any children perhaps, and her physical organs, they were still taut and good looking, that is, as she did not have to feed any child. So it is somehow hard to understand that even after 4 marriages she failed to conceive a child. The only conclusion we can arrive at is that she was hardly interested in bearing a child. Her primary interest was always in sexual delight and pleasure, the tale of sexual games that began since the age of 12. Thus, it is not her wealth, but her figure, her physicality, her body, despite her age, which enchants, which charms Janikin. The real treasure that she has. And yes, and it is difficult, as I said. She says over here, I had the best quinium might be. So meaning I had the best sexual organ. So it is difficult to explain what she means by best quonium. Perhaps she refers to her genitals and indulges in self-praise. A nymphomaniac. She's a nymphomaniac. We can conclude that she is mad about sex, disease, a sort of a mental disease, we can say, a nymphomania. So she is a nymphomaniac, and being a nymphomaniac, she would hardly claim to possess better sexual organs. In fact, the reverse may be true. A girl who begins sexual indulgences as early as her 12th year must, according to most assumptions, must have completely ruined her own body and private parts by the time she reaches 40, as Alison now is. Now we can also ask ourselves that is she throwing bait to other pilgrims? The fact that she is actually saying these things out aloud to all the pilgrims, she might just be attracting, alluring the 6th husband. Something that I had mentioned earlier as well. Then she says, for truly I am all Venusian, insofar as my emotions are concerned, but my head is governed by Mars. Then she says, Venus gave me lust and lechery, but Mars gave me courage, boldness and vigor. My rising sun is Taurus, that is her zodiac sign is Taurus, and Mars is posited therein. Alas, alas, that love should be considered as a sin. Love as in love making, sex, not the soul love. So alas, alas, that love should considered to be a sin. She speaks of free love as also of love outside wedlock, so all sorts of love. Anyway, she says, I followed and was swayed by my passions because of the influence of my constellations. So here you see she is also adhering to astrology and humoralism in order to assess her own character herself as well. The powerful influence of Venus made me such that I could not withdraw or hold back my bellicose as in the body, the physicality, from any good fellow, any young man. But I do have the sign or mark of Mars on my face and also on my secret place. So what does she mean by these things? In these lines, Alison gives us some astrological explanation of her excessive sexuality and stubbornness. Her ascendant is, that is, the zodiac sign is Taurus, the second zodiacal sign where Mars is posited. According to ancient astrology, such a combination makes a woman highly oversexed as well as stubborn. She confesses that she has followed her feelings rather than her head. As such, she could hardly hold herself back from all of the or any of the sexual indulgences that came in her way with any good fellow. The mark of Mars on her face could refer to her red complexion, another quality that leads us to conclude of her lascivious nature. But another mark on her private place could refer to any red spot, etc., down her navel. So any sign, a red spot that points to her lascivious nature, her sexual drive, her great sexual drive, and her stubbornness. So here she assesses her own character as well. Then she says, for God so was be my salvation, that is salvation. She says, may God in his wisdom and mercy may be my salvation, for I was never discreet in love making and was always swayed by my sexual appetite. I could never withhold myself from any man, as like I was saying. This is a frank confession that we can see over here. A very candid confession she is making. And then she's saying, what should I say now? At the end of the month, Jankin the handsome and jolly clerk married me with great festivities, and I on my part gave him all the land and property given to me by my earlier husbands. But soon after I grievously regretted my mistake and repented my hasty act, for Jankin was not at all willing to let me have my way. So probably she means that Jankin restricted her movements and wanderings. By God, he struck a blow on my ear once because I had torn a leaf out of his book, and that blow became the cause of my deafness. ওই একদম Prologue to the Canterbury Tales এ যখন wife of Bath introduction হচ্ছে তখন বলছে she was Sumdel, she was gag-tooth was she, and Somdel deaf, if you remember those lines. So this is how she becomes deaf. And Jankin was also an abusive partner. Thus, it takes us back to that line that is blood betokeneth gold. The abusive nature of passion, the abusive cycle of passion, once again added on to, made cumulatively more by the fifth husband, Jankin. Then she says, but I was stubborn like a lioness, and I had a great and loud tongue and a bad mouth. I continued walking out as I used to do earlier from house to house, though he had made me swear that I would not. Therefore, it means that Alison does not keep her oath. So under the influence of Venus, Alison gave all her property and land to Jankin. whom she married for love and not for his wealth or status. So here she marries for love and making her the influence of Venus making her very promiscuous in nature. So she and very impulsive and stubborn. So she impulsively marries Jankin and stubbornly and impulsively gives away all of her wealth and property to Jankin and then regrets this hasty act. He proved to be a cruel husband who beat her too often. In spite of Jankin's advice on the contrary, Alison did not stop her romantic outings. This stubborn and rigid stand became the cause of their frequent quarrels. Then she says, in this matter he often preached to me and narrated the great deeds of some great Romans. He told me how Simplicius Gallus left his wife for the entire period of life, when one day he saw her bareheaded looking out while standing at the door. So Simplicius Gallus saw his wife standing at the door and looking out without her headdress or head cover, and he abandoned her for all her life. Now this is the lesson that Jankin is giving her. How patriarchal and hypocritical this is, I need not mention it to you. You may just understand, someone leaving the wife just because she is not covered on her head. This incident shows that the attitude of the males to the females had been extremely conservative since time immemorial, and nothing has changed even today when it comes to the attitude of male towards the females. But over here we have the female wanting to change the way of life, wanting to change the way that she is casted into a very specific structure. এর থেকে বেশি করতে পারবে না, এটা করতে পারবে না, সেটা পড়তে পারবে না, যেতে পারবে না, বলতে পারবে না, এরমভাবে খেতে পারবে না, এরমভাবে হাঁটতে পারবে না, এরমভাবে দেখতে পারবে না, এরমভাবে সাজতে পারবে না। এই যে এতগুলো আর কি বাধা নিষেধের মধ্যে যে একটা মহিলা একটা যে বড় হয়ে ওঠে, আরও বেশিভাবে মিডিয়েভাল ইংল্যান্ডের কথা ভাবো, বা পরের দিকে ভিক্টোরিয়ান এজের কথা ভাবো, যেখানে মহিলাদেরকে কর্সেট পরতে হতো, so that their waists would become very thin. They would eat less, therefore making them thinner naturally, less fatter, that is. So it's from time immemorial, men have tried to cast women into a certain mold, into a certain structure, and here Alison breaks all of those structures, each and every one of them. Then she says over here, he told me about another Roman. She says, there's another Roman told he of by name. He told me of another Roman whose wife indulged in midsummer revels without her husband's knowledge, and he abandoned her. Then he would teach me some proverbs from the Bible and also from Ecclesiastes, where he commanded and strictly forbade that a husband would not permit his wife to freely roam about. So the words in Ecclesiastes 25, they are exactly give the water no passage, neither a wicked woman liberty to go abroad. So Jankin would quote this to her as well. So like, you should clog the ways for water and not provide it with passage if you do not want it to. A woman can also be controlled like that. So এবার এখানে একটা মাল্টিপল layers of interpretations করা যায়, and all of them would lead to objectification and oppression of women. So you see, water is a free matter. We know that it can take the shape of any container that it is put into. Highly manipulative. Water can be manipulated to a great extent. Water can be weaponized. Water can be medicinal. It is life-giving. It is an absolute necessity for life. Compare it with a woman. A woman can also be manipulated. She can also be imposed, structured, closed off, shaped, made according to the wishes and desires of the kind of society where this woman is. A patriarchal society that the world has been since ages, therefore making her like water, that she can be shaped into anything that the society deems, which is completely it's very restrictive, it's dehumanizing, disrespectful, traumatic, we might say. Yet at the same point of time, water being compared to woman is also the life force, the life giver, the life continuer. Water is also destructive, it's stormy, it can reduce entire towns to dust. So it has so many civilizations buried under water, so many cities and towns get flooded in water, and that is why hell hath no fury when a woman is enraged. So it's quite obvious that one gender, one sex that has been oppressed, that has been traumatized, that has been imposed upon for so long, for centuries immemorable, we cannot even count, incidents we cannot even count, kinds of violences done towards women, unspeakable kinds of violences, unspeakable. We have not seen the end yet. I think that what can be done to a woman, the end of this violent streak, we do not know the end of it. And that is why sometimes when we see a woman fighting out, she is in complete rage, because any woman carries the trauma of the collective gender inside of her head, like I do, I would confess. And it is very much obvious that when you fight a representative war as a representation of the entire sex, of the entire female sex, your rage will have no bounds. And that is why, quite hypocritically, very pathetically, and in a very pathetic reversal of incidents, this kind of a rage is mostly termed to be hysterical when it comes to a woman, and which is synonymous to madness. বুঝতে পারে না যে কেন এত রাগ, কেন আমি সেটা তোমাদের বললাম, আর যখন লোকে বোঝে না তখনই সেটাকে পাগল বলে, তাই না? আমরা যেগুলোকে বুঝি না সেটাকেই পাগলামি বলি. A mad person has an instinct, has a life inside of his own head which he does not share, cannot share with other people. That does not mean that he is mad in essence. He is mad according to the other person, to the others, to all of us who are not quote unquote mad according to the definitions that we have set, that we have normalized. So all of this. Then the wife, I will continue. Then the wife says, I hated him for his. Sorry. Yes. After giving such references, he would tell me in this manner, the one who builds his house with willow branches and pushes his horse into fallow land is worthy to be hanged on the gallows. So what is this proverb that Jankin is giving her or telling to her. The someone who builds his house with willow branches. Willow branches, ki hoy, the willow tree, it spreads a lot and it sheds a lot. And it slowly occupies a huge space. So building a house with a willow tree is stupidity according to Jankin, and someone who pushes his horse into fallow land, that is infertile land, is also a foolish thing. And then he says that he would say that this kind of a person is worthy to be hanged on the gallows. But all his preachings had no effect on me, the wife says. Then she says, I considered his sayings and proverbs not even worthy. What a strawberry that is. She did not give these proverbs any thought whatsoever. I would not be molded as he desired, like the water. I would not be molded as his desire. And even if he reprimanded me, even if he scolded me, as I have said, even if he abused me, I hated him for his telling me of my vices, and so do more women. So she's saying over here, Alison's stubbornness is clearly seen over here. She's not prepared to listen to anyone who may point out her vices and faults. This attitude naturally makes the young man very furious. God knows it all, that is nature of women, more than I do. This, my attitude, made him utterly mad, and I was in no way willing to put up with him quietly. So she did not surrender to his abuses in any case. Then she says, now I will tell you by St. Thomas Beckett why I tore a leaf out of his book. So the reason because of which Jankin had hit over her ear, causing her to be deaf. So Alison refers to St. Thomas Beckett, whose shrine the pilgrims are now going to visit. That is, St. Thomas Beckett was murdered inside the church in 1170 by the four knights acting again under the behest of their King Henry II. King Henry II ordered 4 knights to kill Thomas Beckett. And Thomas Beckett was attained martyrdom, that is, he was canonized 3 years later, and he became a saint. And now the wife, Alison gives the reason which had made her deaf. He had a book, she says, which for his amusement he used to carry everywhere and every night. He called it Valerius and Theophrastus. While reading his book, he always laughed heartily. Besides, there was once a clerk at Rome, a cardinal called Saint Jerome, who wrote a book called Jovinia. This book contained references to Tertullian, Chrysippus, Trotula, and Eloise. Who was an abbess at a convent near Paris. Moreover, there were the treatises bound in one volume. It was Jankin's daily routine, when he had leisure and free time from worldly occupations, to read these particular parts, which contained the account or stories of wicked women. He knew more legends and lives of women who were good wives as mentioned in the Bible. Just a moment. So what do these lines mean? Jankin had bound many treatises written by various clerks in one thick volume, which he called Valerius and Theophrastus. And they included all of these stories, writings of Walter Map, Theophrastus and Saint Jerome, Tertullian, Chrysippus, Trotula and Eloise, Proverbs of Solomon, of Ovid. They are all anti-feminist works from which Jankin used to quote, and Alison calls this volume Book of Wicked Wives. Moreover, Jankin, being a scholar from Oxford, knew the legends of many good wives too, but he never mentioned them all. That was the politics that Jankin imposed upon, that was a kind of a mental torture with which he imposed upon Alison. He was a learned scholar at Oxford, so he would be knowing about the good wives as well, but he would only quote from the book of bad wives to Alison. Then she continues, it also contained from the Bible, etc., etc. She says, but trust me, it is almost impossible for a clerk to speak out a few good words about wives, unless they were the lives of holy saints and of no other women. Now, the question I ask is, who painted the lion? Now, that is, Alison means who described women. Tell me who. Alison here alludes to an Aesopian fable, where a lion is shown or painted as having been overpowered or smothered by a man. It would have been otherwise if the lion had done the painting. The inference, the meaning of these lines is that all writings from which Jankin quotes are written by males. If women had written such stories, they might have told of many more wicked men than the women mentioned in Jankin's book. Unfortunately, no such female writer had done the part. So, এখানে আর কি বিভিন্ন রকমের examples দেওয়া যেতে পারে. It has also been said, I came across this post on Facebook. I do not know how much authentic it is, but I would like to believe in it. It says that during the First World War, there was this soldier who helped a lot in one of the battles and helped save the lives of many men. And he was also a medicinal person. That is how he saved the lives of men. But his name never came down in the books of history, because later it was revealed that that soldier was actually a woman dressed as a female, dressed as a man, and therefore the name was never mentioned because it was a woman. And there are practically various movies. Hidden Figures bole ekta movie ache, ota dekhbe, the very name alludes to the fact that how the women figures are hidden from the discourses from history books as a result of suppressing the voices. And যেই কারণে আর কি দলিত womenদের কথা আমি যদি বলি আর কি, there is even a book called The Other Side of Silence. So এই যে সাইলেন্সটা এর উল্টো দিকে যেখানে আছে, the silent people, তাদের কথাটা আর কি তুলে ধরা, that is what feminism does. It speaks for those who are silent and therefore inspires those silent people to speak for themselves. That is the true task of feminism. So here she gives us a perfect example. She says, who painted the lion? Who? It was a man. If the lion had painted the picture, it would be that the lion is killing the man. So it is always, the edge is always given to the person who observes. The advantage is never of the person who is under observation. The advantage is always of the person, of the one who is observing. The observer is the more powerful one. And the observer is also the recorder, is also the writer, is also the painter. And therefore only his interpretations, only his perspectives, only his points of view remain, as all of the other voices are silenced. Then she says, by God, if women had written stories as clerks have in their prayer books, they would certainly have written many stories of men who have been more wicked than all the generation of Adam. So her bitterness is validated by the very fact that most of the stories and treatises were written by clerics who had Eve's sinful act hammered into their heads. They believed that Eve was the sinister element in paradise, which pushed Adam and Eve both down to earth, and Adam was undeserving of that punishment. Nobody talks about They forget the interpretation of Satan over here, Satan the allurer. So it is the woman who is easily tempted. It is the woman who should save herself from being tempted. The tempter is not the criminal. The tempted is the criminal. Quite very much hypocritical, very much restrictive, very much objectifying over here. And all of the clerks, all of the teachings which Jankin quotes, they are these people, who remember the sinful act of Eve being tempted. Thus their writings were they were biased against female. So she quotes a lot of anti-feminist texts over here. I will just narrate them to you, just a minute. So Allison's, in these lines, I'm just summarizing, Allison's knowledge of contemporary astrology is abundant, we can see. She says that Mercury governs intellectuals, Venus governs love, feelings and emotions, thus both are opposite to each other in their nature and temper. When Venus is exalted in Pisces, Mercury is debilitated. Where Mercury is exalted, that is in Virgo, Venus gets debilitated. Thus there can be no affinity between the two. Chaucer's astrology, learning about Chaucer's astrology will give us a more explained view of these lines. Allison frankly says that all clerks, after they have exhausted their virility and are in old age, that is after they have exhausted their youth, they are in old age, they're incapable of romance or sex, they sit down and they start writing against women. This is the logic that Allison gives us, and it's funny as it may be, it's not completely rational. It is a bold and serious attack on all anti-feminist writing. However, she has a great respect for the Bible and Saint Paul, because she can subvert those. Those are interpretable, and therefore she uses her skill of interpretation and she subverts all of the teachings of Saint Paul and Bible, as she has in so many instances that we have read together. So Allison has digressed again, and now she picks up her story again. She says, but the purpose of telling you what I have told you was that I was beaten for a book by God. One night Jankin, my husband, was reading his book as he sat by fire. First he read about Eve, who because of her wickedness brought misery to all mankind, and that in order to help man to regain that blessed state, Jesus was crucified. So every blame, that is even the death of Christ, was blamed on Eve, according to the books from which Jankin was reading to Allison. And she says, this is a reference to Eve's sin of eating the fruit from the tree of knowledge, of course, as we all know. Then she says, just a moment here. She says, lo, here women may find clearly that woman was the cause of destruction of all mankind. Then he read to me how Samson lost his hair, where his strength lay. So Samson, or just a moment, I'll erase all of these. So Samson of Gaza, that is the allusion. Samson of Gaza married a Philistine woman called Delilah. Samson and Delilah are Golpota Porbe. This is a source of many stories that have been written. So Samson and Delilah, who was bribed by her countrymen to find out the source of Samson's secret, and his secretive source of powers is lay in his hair, that is. And Delilah betrayed her husband by clipping his hair while he was asleep. He suffered defeat and was blinded by the Philistines. So Jankin also read her this story. Then he read If I Don't Lie of Hercules and Deneira, who made Hercules suffer and burn himself. So Deianira sent Hercules, the Greek hero, a shirt smeared with the blood of the centaur Nissus. This is all allusions, Greek allusions. Who had advised her, Nissus had advised her that it would enable her to get Hercules' love, that is. But this shirt caused him so much pain that he ordered that he should be burned alive. So Hercules died out of pain caused by love. It's quite a metaphysical example, yet we see the woman over here as the criminal, someone who is criminalized. The clerk did not forget to narrate the tale of Socrates, who had 2 wives, and now Xanthippe, whom he loved more, hurled a pail of dirty water on his head. So Xanthippe or Xanthippe, one of the 2 wives of the famous Greek philosopher Socrates. She was a very nagging woman. And once she threw a pail of dirty water on Socrates' head. But Socrates remained as calm as a statue. He spoke only a few words. After thunder stops, there comes the rain. This is what Socrates had said. And then he told me of Pasiphae, the queen of Crete. Who was this? Pasiphae was the wife of King Minos. Poseidon, the sea god, made her fall in love with the bull. And she gave birth to the Minotaur, half man, half bull. The Minotaur King Minos was the person who trapped, Icarus' father, Daedalus, in that labyrinth, and Daedalus built that wing of wax in order to free his son, but the son died nevertheless because he moved too close to the sun. A story we all know. Then he also told Alison of Clytemnestra, whose lechery resulted in the cruel murder of her own husband. So Clytemnestra was married to Agamemnon. However, during his absence to Troy, the war for the recovery of Helen, Clytemnestra fell in love with Aegisthus and conspired with him to murder Agamemnon and Cassandra when he returned from the war. Agamemnon was usually considered to be a villain. He also told Alison of this story. Then he told me of Amphiaraus, whose wife, being bribed by the Greeks, persuaded her husband to join the war against Thebes. He also told her the story of Livia, who conspired with her lover Sejanus. So what are all these allusions? Amphiaraus was the prophet of Argos. He foresaw that the war against Thebes would end in disaster. But Polynices bribed Eriphyle with a necklace, and she persuaded her husband to go to the war, which resulted in defeat, retreat, and his death. All these stories can be found in Saint Jerome's book, Against Jovinian. This is the name of the book, Against Jovinian. And Livilla was the wife of Drusus, the son of the Roman emperor. She conspired with her husband's rival Sejanus and poisoned her husband to death. Lucilla was the wife of Roman poet Lucretius. She is said to have poisoned him with a love potion. And he also tells her about the story of Latumius and Arius. Who were they? Over here, Latumius, you can see. So Pasuvius wept over the death of his 3 wives. One after the other, they hanged themselves to death by trees that grew in his garden. Arius, his neighbor, told him there should be no weeping on such happy events, and he asked him to give him a shoot of that tree so that he could plant such a one in his own garden. It reveals the agony of Arius over the conduct of his own wives, perhaps. And he also tells her the story of mischiefs of done by wives of later period too, that some had killed their husbands on their bed. So there is this allusion is not very clear, not very specific. However, we can some sources say that this is an account of the widow of Ephesus in John of Salisbury's book, which was called Polycraticus. Then she says how some wives put poisons in their husband's drink, how some wives poisoned their husbands while they were asleep. So perhaps this is an allusion to Heber's wife Jael, who murdered Sisera in her tent while he was exhausted and was in deep sleep. She drove nails into his head and thus killed him after having invited him to her tent. In fact, besides being a murderer, she violated the law of hospitality. He had entered her tent to take refuge, and Jael had welcomed him. And all of these examples she gives. Then she says, indeed, he knew more proverbs like that. It is better or safer to dwell with a lion or a dragon than with a nagging woman. And it is better to live on the roof than with an angry wife down in the house. That they are so wicked and perverse. Over here, they are so wicked and perverse that they hate even those husbands who always love them. Then he said, if a woman throws away her undergarments, she casts away all her shame. And further, a beautiful woman, unless she be chaste, is as useless as a gold ring in a pig's nose. How? Who would imagine or suppose the pain and misery that he caused me? So all of these stories constantly reiterated to her, not about the good deeds of all women, but only about the bad deeds, thereby creating a type of women, creating a stock type of women who are always perverse and lecherous and lascivious and unchaste and murderous and conspirers. Specific examples of bad deeds of women. Never talks about the bad deeds of men, never talks about the good deeds of women, thereby keeping the discourse, keeping the stories very specific, giving very specific morals and ethics without taking into consideration circumstances, situations, perspectives, or differences even. Then she says, we are towards the end of our reading. Just a moment. Yes. And when I saw he would never find, that is, when I felt that he would never stop reading this paragraph, this entire section that you see over here, what do these lines mean? These are all instances of violence. The fire had been smoldering even since Jankin had started reading the so-called Book of Wicked Wives. Fire, that is the fire in the heart of Alison. Alison tore off a few leaves from that cursed book and gave a blow to Jankin so that he fell backwards beside the fire. But he got up soon and struck a strong blow on Alison's head. She fell prostrate on the floor and pretended to be in a swoon. But when she realized that Jankin might go away, she comes to her sense and shouts, "You thief! You have slain me for my property and land." The charge frightened Jankin, and he soon apologized. He not only returned all her property and land, he also burned the book then and there and promised not to repeat such a thing. In this manner, Alison gets mastery not only of Jankin but also of the household. And this is the entire incident. Then there is an exchange between the friar. Then there's an exchange between the friar and the summoner over here that begins the tale later on. So now when Alison is about to begin her tale, the friar laughs, hearty laugh, and says that it was a very long preamble to a tale. When the summoner hears the friar exclaim, he swears and states that a friar and a fly fall into every dish and topic, pointing out their nosy and disturbing nature. So at this point, the host calls for peace, etc., and Alison gets ready to tell her tale. The point to remember here is that Alison does not relish the way the friar laughs and exclaims, and this incident raises the same anti-feminist prejudices which she had attempted to counter in the prologue. And we feel she would not let the friar go without being made the butt of ridicule, which she does in the very beginning of her tale. Both the friar and the summoner are morally corrupt fellows. They derive a vicarious pleasure from the narrative of the wife of Bath. Though both belong to the same order, each one of them is intent upon ridiculing and humiliating the other. So it is clear that they do not see eye to eye with each other. Of all the pilgrims, only 3 of them, all males, the partner, the summoner and the friar, show keen interest in Alison's prologue simply because her narrative caters to their lewd instincts. So again, a matter of perspective over here. So with that, we end our reading of the prologue to the wife of Bath's tale. I hope you have received all of the materials that I have provided to you, and I hope they will be useful to you. If you come across any problems, please feel free to ask them. Thank you very much.